one coming across.
There's more stuff over there.
MCS2 or MCS1.
We're off.
What's up, guys? In case you haven't heard, earlier today, allegedly, there was a man walking around CIA headquarters, firing a gun in the air, aiming the gun at the CIA headquarters, threatening them. Now it's like a barricade standoff situation. Bomb squad is there. SWAT is there. Virginia, barricade incident near CIA headquarters draws heavy police response. Sergeant with the Fairfax County Police confirmed to Fox News that police are assisting CIA police outside CIA headquarters. What are CIA police? Does CIA have their own police? I don't think I knew that. Blowy's mad, Jay. Yes, guard that pavement. No additional details about the barricade have been immediately provided. Weird, they're being secretive about it. See if anyone else has any more information. CIA police advised that the man had fired several rounds in the air before Fairfax County officers arrived at the scene, per the scanner. Special Operations Division is on scene assisting. Hey, Lord's Watchman. Guy last seen sitting on a park bench. We're also awaiting a White House press conference as well. Robot dog learns and adapts like humans, according to a Swedish AI startup. The company has created a robot dog named Luna that has a functional digital nervous system capable of learning and adapting like humans and many animals. Digital nervous system, huh? Allegedly, the robot dog is able to learn like a real dog. Fractal guy checking his watch, calculating potential overtime. President Trump has displayed the Declaration of Independence in the Oval Office.
This is the Declaration of Independence. Wow. And they ask that this be done. It's never been up. It's been in the vaults for many, many decades. And they said we have to do something like drapes or something because the light eventually affects it. And it's very cool. Oh my gosh. Isn't that great? Just went up yesterday.
Uh-oh. Wow. Don't let Nicolas Cage know.
Think Joe Biden would do this? I don't think so. Do you think he'd think of it? Do you think he knows what it is? This is the Declaration.
I love that he just still every chance he gets, he dogs Joe Biden. Election's over, but he's relentless.
They got a dog and a little tiny command vehicle. You know, they have like a little inversion and stuff. It's to the left, they're bringing it up. It's like the Israeli. It's like the instructions. He just went into the left. He's backing up.
Young Sneed, what happened? So allegedly there was a man earlier today walking around CIA headquarters, firing a gun in the air, pointing it at CIA headquarters. Obviously, massive police response has showed up, and now there's some sort of barricade situation, allegedly. But there's been no movement for over an hour on this. So I'm not sure what is going on. They're not giving out very many details at all. You know, I thought this was America. I thought if you wanted to go for a leisurely stroll and fire your gun in the air, it was well within your Second Amendment rights to do that. Jeez, give the guy a break. Hong Hong, Jesus. Well, now we know it's not you who's firing guns outside of CIA headquarters. Narrows it down a little bit.
Well, work's closed right now. The only way you can get in, where are you trying to go? Yeah.
In fact, you got a license for firing haphazardly?
Right back out on 123, the other side of Olsen.
They do seem pretty chill, Hoosier. Frank tuning in from his F-250 Super Duty trimmer with glorious pleather seats and a gas-guzzling 445 cubic inch V8. Sounds comfy, Frank. Grammy, good to see you. On your way to lunch, check in later. Yeah, I mean, nothing's really happening. Nothing's happened for like an hour, but there is some sort of standoff barricade situation at CIA headquarters with very little information coming out, which isn't shocking. Pongzilla, do the CIA not have guns? I don't know. One article said CIA police are there, and you know, I didn't really know the CIA had their own police. Oh. But I guess they do. Looking for updates here, not expecting any. Owen Schroyer from Fox, not Fox, Alex Jones was swatted last night. Another SWAT incident. Got a couple videos here of that. Cops show up, guns ablazing. One of these times, there's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a really bloody shootout. Blah, blah, blah. CIA cops gave me a ticket for watching Austin Zone. That's what they're out there doing. I believe it.
Put your hands up.
Can I just record this?
Drop the phone. All of our cameras are running, brother.
All right, I assure you, this is a non-starter, gentlemen.
Have the collar of your shirt from the back. Hey, I got top side. You ain't in that front door. Keep your shirt up like that and rotate slowly.
You want me to take my
Hands
shirt?
up. There's not something-
Okay, keep your hands up, shirt over your back, and rotate slowly. What? Do what now?
I have nothing. You want me to take my shirt?
Back the collar of your shirt from the top. Pull up. And rotate. 360. Turn. Slowly. Slowly. Turn.
Okay.
Slowly. Stop.
Slower, faster, slower.
Put your hands on the back of your head.
What do I do with my shirt?
You're going to walk backwards to the sound of my voice. Start walking.
To the hokey pokey.
Keep walking. Backwards towards the sound of my voice. Stop.
Keep on switch, you got front door, I got rear,
Get on your knees.
Just so you guys know, I'm home alone. This is a false police report.
Start crawling back towards the sound of my voice.
Start crawling back. Wait, so get on my hands and knees and crawl now?
Yeah, I'm getting on mine too. Just keep crawling back.
Right, Aaron? Exactly. This is how people get killed. Which is exactly what the swatters want.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Sorry, guys. It's like hurt my knees. Fine. Keep crawling. Keep crawling. Now lay on your stomach. Lay on your stomach. Put your hands out like an airplane.
Lay on your stomach, put your hands out like an airplane. Now slither towards me and hiss like a snake.
Put your palms up towards the sky. Stay right there. Do not move. You understand?
So wait, on your stomach, arms towards the sky? That's hard to do. That hurts, man. You gotta be limber. What am I, a fucking gymnast here? Jesus.
Yes, sir.
The plane noises are non-negotiable.
Oh, police department, make yourself known! Police department, come to the front door!
Was that English? What the fuck?
Oh, police department, come to the front door, your hands up and empty, it's the only way I can guarantee your safety!
What? Do what now?
Yeah, I'm good. Just on the line, start yelling.
Yeah, just start yelling gibberish.
Oh, baby.
Great. Great. Yeah, someone's gonna get killed. Back to our CIA headquarters standoff situation that we know very little details on. Jay, extra cheese, no pickle. What? Dr. Mr. Black, did he say make your fingers into the shape of a gun? Maybe. That might have been what he said. It's extremely unclear what he said. Sergeant Ann Greenleaf. Sit rep on what? The CIA situation? Okay, like hour and a half ago, maybe 2 hours ago, that there was a man spotted pacing around CIA headquarters, firing a gun in the air. Since then, obviously, massive police response. And all we know now is that there is a barricade standoff situation with no further details. I heard somewhere bomb squad was there. That might just be precaution. But they're really just not releasing any more details on this situation. Right, Hoosier says, I just hate it when they say don't move and immediately tell them to start moving, right? Like, don't move! Take your shirt off, put your hands over your head, don't touch your head, hands over your head. And what was he saying, twirl around or something? Do a 360. Like, what, you want me to spin my shirt over my head, or do you want me to do a 360? Like, what do you want from me here? Hoosier, how do you barricade yourself outside? Yeah, I don't know. Good question. Looks like everyone's leaving now. Is it the situation over? You're never going to hear about this ever again? One of the allegedly new JFK files, informant 21266 has advised that one Thomas Mosley has been in touch with a group of Chicago Cubans who may be involved in the assassination of the late President JFK. Also that this Cuban group is endeavoring to purchase through Mosley a variety of automatic weapons and explosives. That's the synopsis. Down here at the bottom it says, quote, we now have plenty of money. Our new backers are Jews. As soon as we or they take care of Kennedy. What? What now? Looks like they forgot to redact a part here. Hongity hong, sang Floyd's Banana. Hungary just became the first European country to ban pride events in Viktor Orban's latest anti-LGBTQ crackdown, allowing facial recognition to identify and punish disobedient attendees. Liberal opposition MPs, Momentum Party, protested inside Parliament by using smoke grenades. Pride events are banned in Hungary.
Ötös számon terjesztette elő. Most az összegző módosító javaslatról döntünk. Kérdezem a tisztelt Országgyűlést, elfogadja-e a Törvényalkotási Bizottság T/per 11.201/4-es számú összegző módosító javaslatát? Kérem, szavazzanak! Kimondom a határozatot. Az Országgyűlés az összegző módosító javaslatot 137 igen, 28 nem és egy tartózkodó szavazattal elfogadta. Most a zárószavazás következik, melynek során a törvényjavaslatnak az összegző módosító javaslattal módosított szövegéről dönt.
St. Floyd's Banana, thank you for the super chat. It says, the Jews unalive JFK. Hey, according to that one document, there's also documents that say it was only Oswald who did it. There's other documents that say it was the CIA that did it. Some blame Castro. Russia might have done it. The mafia might have done it. Basically nothing new. It's all the same old theories. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure you can't the K word anywhere. Oh, that K word? Yeah, I probably can't do that one either. I thought you meant the other K word. Oh, briefing underway.
SpaceX to rescue these brave astronauts alongside NASA. The president also called the acting administrator of NASA and told her to bring the astronauts home as soon as possible. As acting administrator Janet Petro said herself yesterday, per President Trump's direction, NASA and SpaceX worked diligently to pull the schedule a month earlier. The president looks forward to welcoming Butch and Sunny to the Oval Office when they are recovered. This historic mission brings new meaning to President Trump's promise to always look out for the forgotten man and woman. On another important matter, yesterday, President Trump and President Putin spoke about the need for peace and a ceasefire in the Ukraine war. Both leaders agreed this conflict needs to end with a lasting peace and also stressed the need for improved bilateral relations between the United States and Russia. President Trump also spoke with President Zelensky this morning to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their needs and requests. As President Trump has said repeatedly, the precious lives and money that both Ukraine and Russia have been spending in this war would be better spent on the needs of their people. This terrible conflict would have never started with President Trump in charge, but he's determined to end it once and for all. President Trump also promised maximum transparency and a commitment to rebuild the trust of the American people in our intelligence community. Part of that promise was to fully release previously classified records related to the assassination of former President John F. Kennedy, and he made that happen yesterday. This historic release consisted of approximately 80,000 pages of previously classified records that are now published. The records are available to access either online at archives.gov/JFK or in person, accessible to the American people at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. Records that are currently only available for in-person viewing are being digitized and will be uploaded in the coming days. On another note, positive economic data continues to pour in, showing the immediate impact of President Trump's pro-growth agenda. After suffering a steep decline in the final year of the Biden administration, the manufacturing sector came roaring back in February. Industrial production surged in February. These are new numbers, 3 times at a greater 3 times rate than the expectations to its highest ever recorded level. And President Trump's laser focus on massive deregulation and unleashing our domestic energy industry is leading to stabilities for Americans' bottom lines. As Newsweek summed it up today, gas prices are plummeting under President Trump. And the Trump administration continues to make American communities safer
Gas
through
prices
our
down,
ongoing
egg
mass
prices
deportation
down.
campaign of illegal
Democrats
alien criminals.
have lost all their talking
FBI
points.
Director Kash Patel announced the agency captured another fugitive from its 10 most wanted list, securing the extradition of Francisco Javier Roman Bardeles, a key senior leader of the brutal MS-13 gang. And the brave men and women of ICE also arrested a number of dangerous aliens across the country in recent days. You will see them on this screen. ICE San Francisco just arrested a citizen of Guatemala convicted of sexual battery. ICE New Orleans arrested a citizen of Ecuador convicted of rape in Suffolk County, New York. ICE Atlanta arrested a citizen of Mexico convicted of assault by strangulation. ICE Dallas arrested a citizen of Mexico convicted of assault with a firearm and rape with a foreign object. And ICE Houston arrested a citizen of Guatemala convicted of indecent sexual contact with a child in Texas. These are heinous criminal alien monsters who the previous administration allowed to flood into our country. And every time President Trump and this team deport one of them, our country becomes safer. Finally, before I open it up to questions, I want to tout how successful our efforts have been in filling out President Trump's administration. There have been a record number of 281 Senate confirmed nominations already, with another 280 in process. Here at the White House, OPM and GSA, we have filled 100% of the total number of slots. And this is a record number of placements in the first 58 days of any administration, and a testament to the caliber and the sheer quantity of talented people who want to work for President Trump to make America great again. Here in our new media seat today, we have Katie Pavlich. Katie is the editor of townhall.com, which is a subsidiary of Town Hall Media. It's a leading conservative news and opinion outlet based right here in Washington, D.C., with writers and journalists reporting around the country. Last year, Town Hall Media had 60 million unique users and 1.4 billion page views, with a broad reach on a number of social media platforms. With that, Katie, please kick us off.
Thank you, Caroline. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. So given the back and forth with this U.S. District Judge and the administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act, does the president plan to send new and additional flights of Venezuelan gang members, now designated as foreign terrorists, from the U.S. to El Salvador or elsewhere? Can Americans expect to see those flights sometime soon?
Americans can absolutely expect to see the continuation of the mass deportation campaign that has been successfully led by this president, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, and also our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Since you brought up the judges, I would like to point out that the judges in this country are acting erroneously. We have judges who are acting as partisan activists from the bench. They are trying to dictate policy from the President of the United States. They are trying to clearly slow walk this administration's agenda, and it's unacceptable. As the President said last night, we will continue to comply with these court orders. We will continue to fight these battles in courts, but it's incredibly apparent that there is a concerted effort by the far left to judge shop, to pick judges who are clearly acting as partisan activists from the bench in an attempt to derail this president's agenda. We will not allow that to happen. And not only are they usurping the will of the president and the chief executive of our country, but they are undermining the will of the American public, tens of millions of Americans who duly elected this president to implement the policies that are coming out of this White House.
And then one more question. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said yesterday that he was united with Democrats in working against Americans who, quote, their attitude is, I made my money all by myself. How dare your government take my money from me? Or, I built my company with my bare hands. How dare your government tell me how to treat my customers? What is the president's response to this, given his upcoming tax agenda and need to work on Capitol Hill?
Well, we certainly hope that Democrats all of a sudden are for more money in the pockets of the American public. The president has made it incredibly clear that he is committed to tax cuts. He is committed to passing a big reconciliation package later this year, ending no taxes on tips, taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security for our hardworking seniors. And we encourage everybody on Capitol Hill to support that when it comes to the finish line, especially Democrats who clearly need a boost from the American public right now. Their approvals are at an all-time record low. Thanks for being with us, Katie. Garrett.
I have one other question, but I want to follow up on Katie's question, actually. You said the mass deportation campaign would continue, but she asked about the flights specifically. Will those flights to El Salvador continue while this case is being appealed?
We don't have any flights planned specifically, but we will continue with the mass deportations. And I would just like to point out that the judge in this case is essentially trying to say that the president doesn't have the executive authority to deport foreign terrorists from our American soil. That is an egregious abuse of the bench. This judge does not have that authority. It is the opinion of this White House and of this administration, and that's why we're fighting this in court. And it's very, very clear that this is an activist judge who is trying to usurp the president's authority. Under the Alien Enemies Act, the president has this power, and that's why this deportation campaign has continued. And this judge, Judge Boasberg, is a Democrat activist. He was appointed by Barack Obama. His wife has donated more than $10,000 to Democrats, and he has consistently shown his disdain for this president and his policies, and it's unacceptable.
You took me right where I wanted to go about the idea that these people are all foreign terrorists, but Judge Boasberg was originally appointed by George W. Bush and then elevated by Barack Obama. I just feel like I should clear that up.
Well, let me just say something to that effect, Garrett. 67% of all of the injunctions in this century have come against which president? Donald J. Trump. Let me say that again. 60% of the injunctions by partisan activists in the judicial branch have come against President Donald Trump, and 92% of those have been from Democrat-appointed judges. This is a clear, concerted effort by leftists who don't like this president and are trying to impose or slow down his agenda.
So, given that, do you think it's a good use of Congress's time and the president's political capital to try to impeach and remove a federal judge, which would take 67 votes you're unlikely to get in the Senate?
Well, look, the president has made it clear that he believes this judge in this case should be impeached. And he has also made it clear that he has great respect for the Chief Justice John Roberts, and it's incumbent upon the Supreme Court to rein in these activist judges. These partisan activists are undermining the judicial branch by doing so. We have co-equal branches of government for a reason, and the president feels very strongly about that. Jackie.
Thanks, Carol. What options does the president have to, he says he's going to follow court orders. He wouldn't defy a court order, but he's raised these concerns about these judges acting in such a partisan way. What option does he have to ensure that his agenda continues to move forward while this is ongoing and the judges appear to be trying to just block and delay and impede?
Well, you're right. They are trying to block, delay, and impede. This is lawfare. The president is no stranger to it. He faced it in his campaign, and this is a continuation of the lawfare that President Trump faced as a candidate, and he's now unfortunately facing as a president. Clearly, these partisan activists in the judicial branch didn't get the memo on November 5th when the American people overwhelmingly re-elected this president to continue with mass deportations. So White House counsel and the Department of Justice are working on this. They're appealing these cases, and we will continue to use the full weight of the White House counsel's office and the president's team of lawyers to fight this in court, because we know we will win, even if we have to go all the way to the Supreme Court.
One more on TDA. Andy McCarthy said in an interview with Hugh Hewitt, he certainly agrees with what the president is trying to do with the Alien Enemies Act, but he's not sure that the law is completely on his side. He cites some previous Supreme Court rulings dealing with enemy combatants in wartime, says that even they have a challenge or a right to challenge their detention in court. He raised concern also that while TDA has been designated as a terrorist organization, these individuals hadn't been prosecuted for terrorism. So my question is, will the president ask Congress potentially to declare war on these cartels for the invasion that he's talked about so that he's on stronger legal footing?
Well, we absolutely disagree with the legal opinion of the individual that you mentioned. We would not have moved forward with this if we didn't believe the president. This was within the president's executive authority to continue with this mass deportation effort under the authority provided to him under the Alien Enemies Act. And when you read the act, as I did last time at the podium, a predatory incursion is absolutely what has happened with Tren de Aragua. They have been sent here by the hostile Maduro regime in Venezuela, and the president, immediately upon taking office, designated TDA as a foreign terrorist organization. And under this act, it is within the president's authority to deport these terrorists. And anybody trying to defend these terrorists who have now been sent off of American soil should talk to the families of the individuals who these heinous monsters have killed and have raped. If you talk to those families, they are so heartened by the president's decision to take tough action and to use his executive authority, something that no other president has been willing to do, because President Trump does what he says he's going to do, and he is deporting these foreign terrorists from American soil to secure our homeland, and he's within his rights to do that. Jennifer.
Very quickly on Tesla, there's a website that's trying to dox Tesla owners across the country and saying they're only going to take down personal information when people show that they've sold their cars. What's the administration going to do about that?
I haven't seen that website, but we certainly think it's despicable, the violence that has taken place against Tesla, the company, its employees, and also just Americans who have chosen to drive an electric vehicle. Many of them are Democrats, by the way. Democrats were big supporters of Tesla and of electric vehicles until Elon Musk decided to vote for Donald Trump. So we would like Democrats to also come out and condemn this heinous violence that we have seen, and I believe the Attorney General has said she's investigating these incidents as acts of domestic terrorism. Jennifer.
On Ukraine, can you
say, is the White House going to pause foreign military aid or intelligence sharing with Ukraine, as Russia says it's pushing for? And then I have a follow-up on the Federal Trade Commission.
Sure. When it comes to Ukraine, I do have a statement for you from the National Security Advisor and also the Secretary of State. First, I'd like to reiterate what the President said earlier following his call with President Zelensky this morning. He said he just completed a very good telephone call with President Zelensky. It lasted approximately 1 hour. Much of the discussion was based on the call made yesterday with President Putin in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. We are very much on track, and I will ask Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz to give an accurate description of the points discussed. That statement will be put out shortly. Well, I have that statement for you right here. Bear with me as I read it. Today, President Trump and Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky had a fantastic phone conversation. President Zelensky thanked President Trump for a productive start for the work of the Ukrainian and American teams in Jeddah on March 11th. The meeting of the senior officials from both nations significantly helped in moving toward ending the war. President Zelensky thanked President Trump for the support of the United States, especially the Javelin missiles that President Trump was first to provide in his efforts towards peace. The leaders agreed Ukraine and America will continue working together to bring about a real end to the war, and that lasting peace under President Trump's leadership can be achieved. President Trump fully briefed President Zelensky on his conversation with Putin and the key issues discussed. They reviewed the situation in Kursk and agreed to share information closely between their defense staffs as the battlefield situation evolved. President Zelensky asked for additional air defense systems to protect his civilians, particularly Patriot missile systems, and President Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. The two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. Technical teams will meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to discuss broadening the ceasefire to the Black Sea on the way to a full ceasefire. They agreed this could be the first step toward the full end of the war and ensuring security. President Zelensky was grateful for the president's leadership in this effort and reiterated his willingness to adopt a full ceasefire. President Trump also discussed Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for Ukrainian energy infrastructure. President Zelensky also thanked President Trump for continuing to push humanitarian concerns, including the exchange of prisoners of war. He noted they had just had a successful exchange and thanked the president for his leadership on that. President Trump also asked President Zelensky about the children who had gone missing from Ukraine during the war, including the ones that had been abducted, and President Trump promised to work closely with both parties to help make sure those children were returned home. They agreed all parties must continue the effort to make a ceasefire work. The presidents noted the positive work of their advisors and representatives, especially Secretary Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Special Envoy Kellogg, and others. The presidents instructed their teams to move ahead with the technical issues related to implementing and broadening the partial ceasefire. The presidents instructed their advisors and representatives to carry out this work as quickly as possible. The presidents emphasized that in further meetings, the teams can agree on all necessary aspects of advancing toward lasting peace and security. That is a lengthy statement that was just given to me, so thanks for bearing with me. Our office will, of course, provide this after. And as you know, as I just pointed out in the statement, the president's team of negotiators and national security experts will be heading to Saudi again later this week to continue working on and ironing out the details. But I would just like to emphasize we have never been this close to peace, and it's only because of President Trump that we are here. I think a couple of years ago, as you all reported on the war, it was incomprehensible to have a partial ceasefire in this conflict. And today that is true because of the leadership of this president.
So they agreed to closely share information between their defense staffs. Does that mean all intelligence sharing will continue? So the White House is rejecting Russia's request to pause.
Intelligence sharing in terms of defense for Ukraine will continue to be shared. Mary.
Thanks, Caroline. I have two questions. One on the United States Institute of Peace and then on the Supreme Court, if that's okay.
Sure.
So on the United States Institute of Peace, this is a little bit wild. I understand the old president refused to leave after he was removed from his position. He barricaded himself in his offices, had to be escorted out by police, left the building without Wi-Fi, telephones, elevators, and more, and is now telling media that Doge broke in and illegally removed him. So can you comment on this sequence of events and specify, did Doge illegally enter?
I'm really glad you brought this up, Mary. We were made aware of this story by individuals at Doge, at Elon Musk's team, and also at the State Department who were unable to access this building. And it became very clear that there was a concerted effort amongst the rogue bureaucrats at the United States Institute of Peace to actually physically barricade themselves essentially inside of the building to prevent political appointees of this administration who work at the direction of the President of the United States to get into the building. There was a piece in the Daily Caller, thank you for sharing the truth on this, about what happened. Staff contacted the MPD in an attempt to prevent Doge personnel from entering. They barricaded the doors. They also disabled telephone lines, internet connections, and other IT infrastructure within the building. They distributed flyers internally, encouraging each other to basically prevent these individuals from accessing the building. I use this to say this is what Doge and this administration is facing. It's a resistance from bureaucrats who don't want to see change in this city. President Trump was elected on an overwhelming mandate to seek change and implement change, and this is unacceptable behavior.
Thank you. And just really quick on the Supreme Court. I know it's been almost 3 years now since the leak of the draft Dobbs opinion to Politico, actually. A leak which sparked protesting outside the homes of the justices and even brought on one attempted assassination attempt. I know Justice Alito said that it made the justices targets for assassination, but yet the Supreme Court has not tracked down any leaker. Does the White House have interest in finding out who that leaker was, and can you comment on that at all?
I know generally speaking the president has an interest in finding leakers and he believes it's unacceptable, and it's the position of this administration. You've seen the Secretary of Homeland Security has taken tough action at her agency. Leaking is unacceptable to this president and to the leaders across the board in this cabinet, especially when it puts people in harm's way. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. A mom whose daughter was forced to change in a locker room with a biological male at school filed a complaint with the DOJ. How will the Trump DOJ deal with violations of President Trump's orders protecting women and girls like this?
I would defer you to the Department of Justice on that specific case, but the president has made it incredibly clear that it is the policy of this administration that there are only two genders, male and female, only two sexes rather, male and female, and that we are not going to tolerate such behavior by men pretending to be women. The president will continue to strongly stand for the rights of women and girls, not just in sports and on athletic fields, but also in private spaces like locker rooms and bathrooms. Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. On the FTC, two quick questions. Can you explain the president's thinking in his decision to fire the two Democratic commissioners, especially given that Mark Meadow is on track to be confirmed next week and there would be a Republican majority? My biggest question is why now?
Sure. Because the time was right to let these people go, and the president absolutely has the authority to do it. And they were given ample notice in a letter that I believe your outlet reported on. So it pretty much explains exactly why this administration chose to let those individuals go.
Is the ultimate goal to get this to the Supreme Court to try to overturn the 1935 precedent?
The goal was to let these individuals go. If we have to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court, we certainly will. Rachel.
Back to those deportation flights to El Salvador, can the administration provide any more details on how authorities determined that each of those men were in fact members of a gang? And if the White House can publish images, photos, videos of those men, why can't the administration just release basic information like their identities and names?
We are not going to reveal operational details about a counterterrorism operation, but what I can assure you, as I said on Monday, we have the highest degree of confidence in our ICE agents and our Customs and Border Patrol agents who have committed their lives to targeting illegal criminals in our country, particularly foreign terrorists, and they had great evidence and indication. They have the highest degree of professionalism, and they were 100% confident in the individuals that were sent home on these flights and in the president's executive authority to do that.
Follow up, I know in the last briefing you cited privacy concerns as a reason why the administration may not be able to reveal the identities. What exactly are the privacy rights of immigrants who were deported that the administration says were dangerous enough to be sent to El Salvador and sit in a prison?
Again, as I just said, we're not going to reveal the operational details of a counterterrorism operation for quite obvious reasons. We're trying to combat terrorism here in the United States of America. Jeff.
wanted to ask something else about the phone call yesterday. There was a couple different readouts from the Kremlin and the U.S. on a couple different points. One was energy and infrastructure. The U.S. statement said energy and infrastructure. The Kremlin said energy infrastructure. What is your understanding of what the actual substance of that disagreement was? And then one other question on that.
I would defer you to the readout that was provided by the White House. That's our understanding, and that's the truth.
And if I could ask a question about the judge as well. How does a president define a bad judge? Is it just someone who disagrees with him? And is that a dangerous precedent in this case, because this is a temporary ruling from Judge Boasberg that he could ultimately rule in your favor? Is he setting up a standard here for calling for the impeachment of a judge who may ultimately rule on your side?
No, it has nothing to do with disagreeing with the president on policy. It's with disagreeing with the Constitution and the law. And it's trying to usurp the authority of the executive branch of this country. It's having baseless reasoning for these injunctions. And it's a clear effort by these judges to slow roll this president's agenda. And if you just look at the injunctions that this president has faced, deporting foreign terrorists from our homeland, hiring and firing of executive branch employees, which when the president is the executive of the executive branch. You also see an injunction by a partisan activist judge when it comes to the Secretary of Defense trying to determine the readiness of our troops and the qualifications of our troops in our armed forces. Does a single district court judge really have more authority over the Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of Defense to determine who should serve in our United States Armed Forces? Absolutely not. Anyone who has taken a basic civics lesson can understand that, and it's ridiculous lawfare that we are witnessing.
The president said he supports. I'm sorry. The president said he respects the Chief Justice here. Does he respect him specifically on this case and this opinion, or respects him overall? And has he spoken to any other Supreme Court justice?
The president respects Chief Justice Roberts overall. He just expressed that to me in the Oval Office. But it's also quite clear that the Supreme Court needs to rein in these judges who are acting as partisan activists, and they are undermining the judicial branch. And it's a dereliction of duty on their behalf. Deanna, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Caroline. On the call with Zelensky, did they discuss the minerals deal at all? Is that back on the table, and what do the Ukrainians have to do to get that back on the table? And then one on the Russia call as well.
Again, I just provided a very lengthy readout of the call that was provided by the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. And now we have moved beyond the economic minerals deal. We are at a place of peace. We're at a partial ceasefire, and we're moving towards a full ceasefire and a long-standing peace in this conflict. And that's great news for the American public.
The Kremlin readout mentioned that Trump and Putin spoke about potential U.S.-Russia hockey games. And the Kremlin readout also said that Russia wanted the U.S. to stop U.S. intelligence and U.S. funding to Ukraine. The president has said that that conversation did not happen. Just wondering if you can get us any more clarity on that. And also, again, if it's energy infrastructure or if it's energy and infrastructure, because I think there is a big difference between that.
Again, as for the readouts of the call, I would defer you to ours. And when it comes to the topic of hockey, it did come up. However, we're more interested in securing a peace deal than scheduling hockey games right now. Sean.
Hey, about the deportation flight. So was it the president himself who directed the planes to stay in the air after the judge ordered them to turn back?
The president signed invoked the Aliens Enemies Act with a proclamation, which then directed the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State to move forward with the plan of action. And as I said yesterday, all of the planes that were subject to the judge's written order took off before the order was submitted in court. I was asked and answered that question multiple times yesterday. Kate, go ahead.
Is the president still considering pressuring Russia with sanctions or tariffs to try to get a full ceasefire? And is there any kind of deadline or timeline that the White House has in mind for when that pressure might ramp up?
Again, the president had a nearly 2-hour-long call with President Putin yesterday. We provided a readout of that call, and we have his negotiating team heading to the Middle East this week to continue these discussions in regards to sanctions and any other details. I'm not going to give a readout of those from this podium.
And on TikTok, is Oracle the leading contender for a deal, and would the U.S. back a deal that keeps TikTok's algorithm and the underlying technology still in Chinese hands?
As President Trump does so well, we don't get ahead of ourselves when we are in the midst of the art of the deal. So when the president and this team are ready to announce a deal on TikTok, which is a high priority for the president, we will make that known. I've seen that reporting, but I'm not going to comment on it just yet. Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Press Secretary Leavitt. Some prominent Trump supporters have been making the case that Derek Chauvin deserves a pardon. They argue that he did not receive a fair trial. Joe Biden and other Democrats actually implied that he was guilty while the trial was going on. The LM rioters had these jurors under immense threat and pressure. Mainstream media, frankly, many news outlets here today are complicit here. They chose to ignore the autopsy report. They chose to ignore the full body camera footage. They decided to slander Derek Chauvin as a racist cop instead. Does the administration believe Derek Chauvin received a fair trial, and will they consider a pardon moving forward?
The president has been asked and answered this question. He said it's not something he's considering at this time. Philip.
Thank you. Two questions. First, just a follow-up on the readouts from those calls. When it comes to the discrepancies between the U.S. and Russian readout of that call between President Trump and Putin, is it the president's assessment that something that's getting lost in translation, or does he believe that the Russians are trying to play games here?
Nope. The president believes in his team that put the readout out, and he also put his own out on Truth Social. We've been incredibly transparent about all of the president's calls with foreign leaders, and again, I would defer you to the readout.
And then following up on...
Thank you, Caroline. White House said yesterday that gas prices across the U.S. have fallen for the fourth straight week. 34 states now seeing gas under $3 a gallon. This limited ceasefire with Ukraine regarding oil refineries, energy, will that affect gas prices here in the U.S.?
Well, it's certainly the president's hope that gas prices will continue to fall, and he's working every single day to ensure that we do. As you just mentioned, there's been very encouraging data. Inflation is cooling and gas prices are falling. The president has established a National Energy Dominance Council, and it's ultimately the president's goal, and this administration is working hard on it every single day, to increase our energy production right here in the United States of America, to have it Trump energy boom like we saw in our first term, which will not only lead to lower fuel prices here at home, but also lessen the rate of inflation that was created by the previous administration.
One more on Tesla, Caroline. Tim Walz, Governor Walz, saying last night he frequently checks Tesla stock. In doing so, to quote, give me a little boost during the day. How should Americans view politicians who take pride in the downfall of an American car company?
I think that's quite sad, but I think Governor Walz unfortunately is living a sad existence after his devastating defeat on November 5th. Reagan, go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. Across the country, Tesla cars are being lit on fire, dealerships are being shot up, Molotov cocktails are being used. There was a website posted yesterday that shared the addresses of private Tesla owners and reportedly had Kash Patel's information on it. A.G. Bondi has called this acts of domestic terrorism. Does the White House have any indication that this is some sort of coordinated movement or that it's being funded by some outside group? And do you know if the investigation by the DOJ is being investigated as incidents of organized terror?
I believe the Attorney General has made her comments clear on that. She is investigating these events as acts of domestic terrorism, and we fully condemn them. And as I said earlier to Jackie's question, we think it's despicable what is happening to not just this American company, but also their innocent employees. And again, innocent Americans who drive these vehicles. We condemn it wholeheartedly. Sure.
More than 24,000 workers in 18 agencies are in the process of being reinstated. What is your message to these workers, and can you assure them they won't be fired again as the administration directs agencies to do more layoffs?
Well, the administration is complying with the court's order. Again, as I have spoken about repeatedly, we think it's despicable that we have judges acting as judicial activists, partisan activists, trying to dictate who the President of the United States, the executive of the executive branch, can hire and fire. We have never seen anything like this. We are fighting this in court, and we will continue to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to. And as for federal employees, it's been the very common sense position of this president and the administration that bureaucrats here in Washington, D.C. need to show up to the office just like the rest of America. Middle-class Americans, from doctors to business owners to teachers to law enforcement officers, have to show up to their offices every single day. And the president president has made it a clear priority that people in this city have to do the same. And we are also continue to be committed to reducing the scale of our workforce and to reducing the size of our federal bureaucracy here in Washington, D.C. to save taxpayers' money. Annie, go ahead.
Thanks so much. In the statement that you read, you referenced the president's interest in helping return Ukrainian children to their parents and to their families. There's an organization that provides intel and information about those children that their aid has been cut. It's a Yale University program that used foreign aid. And I'm curious if, as part of this new thinking with Ukraine, that aid might be unfrozen.
I have no updates about that or that specific program at this time. Karen.
Just to follow up on your answer to the question on the minerals deal, you said that the White House has moved beyond the minerals deal. What does that mean? Is that no longer on the table?
Nope. It means the minerals deal was that first set of framework that you all saw in that very public meeting with President Zelensky and President Trump in the Oval Office. We are now focused on a long-term peace agreement. As you know, on that deal or that meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump, the Ukrainian president at the time wasn't talking about a greater peace deal. We are now at that place where we are talking about that. So we've moved beyond just the economic minerals deal framework, and we're looking at a lasting ceasefire. Right now we're at a partial ceasefire, but again, the president is sending his highly skilled, intelligent, and experienced team to Saudi Arabia later this week to continue fighting for peace in this conflict. And I would just reiterate one more time, we have never been closer to peace than we are today. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you later.
All right, back to this CIA standoff situation. Here's something I hadn't seen before about this. Apparently the gunman starts getting angry, talks about Osama bin Laden and Trump during the ongoing armed standoff.
Report is going pretty good. When we talk about nothing, he's good to go. But once we start getting into any kind of conversation, getting him to come out, he starts
check for an open mic.
Angry. He gets talks about Osama bin Laden, Trump. I believe he leads.
All units check for an open mic.
Anything else? Has talked about his family. They're pretty much a good hook so far. He's the baby. Report is going pretty good. When we talk.
Okay. Not sure what that means. Jay, nice decade mashup, right? Osama bin Laden is relevant again? Interesting. Yesterday, at an anti-Elon paid protesters in front of a Tesla dealership, this man decided to give them something to breathe in. Spicy. Kimba, that guy's been mad a long time, right?
Behind you guys, behind you.
So, Hunter Biden, who had apparently had like 18 fucking security agents protecting him still. Paid for by the U.S. government, paid for by the taxpayers. He lost his protection, and he posted this video after losing his protection, I guess to show everyone that he's no longer being protected. Yeah, no more Secret Service protection. Ashley Biden also had 13 Secret Service people protecting her at all times, which is just outrageous. But doesn't Hunter look high as balls here? Doesn't he look like he's on something? He's vacationing in South Africa, by the way. But this is the video he posts after he loses his Secret Service protection. PCB, he's tripping balls. He definitely found some crack in the carpet. Whiskey Tango, someone say balls? What? What a crackhead. Still a ton of SWAT here at Dolly Madison Boulevard and Georgetown Pike, right outside of CIA headquarters. Road rash. Yes, he did tell a judge that he's bankrupt. Told a judge that he's bankrupt, poor, no money, and then he went off on a at least 3-month vacation to South Africa. He's staying at a resort that costs like $1,000 a night or something. I guess his definition of poor is a little different than my definition of poor, but you know. Audio head. He's just showing everyone that his niece isn't there, that we know of. He told her to hide in the closet, under the bed. Tim Walz says he can kick most Trump supporters' asses.
This
How do you
notion
fight it?
And well, this notion
I think
of
I could kick most of their ass. I do think that if they want to do it. I know I can outrun them, but I don't know if we're going to fall into that place where we want to. Okay, we challenge you to a WWE fight here type of thing.
Do you think Tim Walz could kick your ass? Not sure what's going on here. I'm sorry. This is how all road protesters should be treated. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it. I didn't know there'd be consequences to my actions. No! Chuck Schumer says he sometimes wakes up at 3 in the morning to think about Elon Musk. I bet you do, Schumer.
So a lot of people responded to the anguish. I appreciate it. I wake up 3 in the morning sometimes, so worried about the future of the country under these oligarchs or klepto, whatever, or, oligarchs, I guess.
Yes.
And but so a lot of people respond.
In 30 minutes, we've got Federal Reserve Chair Powell holding a briefing about whether or not about the interest rates. Okay, I guess just now it said the Feds will hold interest rates steady, which as expected, still sees additional cuts coming soon. The Federal Reserve, in a closely watched decision Wednesday, held the line on benchmark interest rates, though still indicated that reductions are likely later in the year. Faced with pressing concerns over the impact tariffs will have on a slowing economy, the rate-setting Federal Open Market Committee kept its key borrowing rate targeted in a range between 4.25 and 4.5%, where it has been since December. Markets had been pricing in virtually zero chance of a move at this week's two-day policy meeting, so this was as expected. Along with the decisions, officials updated their rate and economic projections for this year and through 2027 and altered the pace at which they are reducing bond holdings. Okay. This all seems like it was as expected, but Powell will be holding a press conference here pretty soon. Let's see what Powell has to say. Susie, yeah, it's still kind of ongoing, but more and more people look like they're packing up and leaving. I haven't found any update on the situation in over an hour, though, so I don't know. SWAT soccer moms, yeah. Yeah, they're just not giving out any information here. Okay. A CIA representative is denying initial reports of any shots fired during this incident, despite clear indication. Right? It's been 3 hours and they're just now saying no shots fired? There's an ongoing incident that law enforcement is currently responding to outside CIA headquarters. Additional details will be made available as appropriate. So we're not going to tell you shit, and everything you've heard isn't true. Sounds like a CIA update to me. Joe, no shots fired, just like JFK. Trainer, why are we pretending like the FBI and CIA are still legitimate? I'm certainly not pretending like they are. Whatever they say, I immediately believe the opposite until proven otherwise. Okay, the Fed sees 2 rate cuts coming before the end of the year. Fractal, right? Seems like a whole lot of hubbub for no shots being fired. Yeah. Yeah, if it... Oh, it was just a man walking around the area? No shots fired? Ranker over on Twitch. I am also streaming over on YouTube. That's where most of the chat is coming from. Sometimes I stream to Rumble and Kick as well, but not today. Ranker says the machine is paying Newsom to come off as moderate so he can pull higher than a Dem. Yeah, he's clearly angling for a 2028 run for president. We'll see if it works. Personally, I think there's too much he's already done that could allow that to happen. I mean, it doesn't mean the Dems won't actually nominate him to be their guy, but I think we have enough ammo to take him down. Also, 2028 is so fucking far away. It's crazy to even start thinking about it. So much can and will happen between now and then. Seth, no shots were fired, but someone did flash the OK hand sign. by shots fired, they just mean he actually misgendered somebody as he walked by them. Hong Hong Chanka. Joe, maybe a water main broke. Ranker, CIA accidentally swatted itself. Yeah, whoever at the CIA is swatting all of these right-wing influencers on X accidentally swatted themselves. Oops. I put in the wrong address. My bad. It was an autofill situation. I want one of those bags. Where do I get one? Joe discount. Alex Jones swatted him back. Pack it up, boys. Yeah, we should order them some pizza. Tornado threat in Illinois. U.S. State Department press briefing starting soon. Sargent and Greenleaf. We're in Illinois. I'm not sure. Currently in Gardner, Illinois is where this guy is. Wherever Gardner, Illinois is. Let's find out. Southwest of Chicago. Yeah, this is pretty anticlimactic, Ranker. I agree. And not to mention, they've literally been standing out here for hours. Hours. When did this first happen? This was first reported... gosh, almost 4 hours ago. And we have like basically no update on the situation in 4 hours. Federal Reserve cuts 2025 growth outlook, raises inflation forecast, raises unemployment projection to 4.4%.
Lee, some things never change. All right, so everyone's here. We're all good. Hi, how are you? Do we have a seat? Great, thank you. So I do have something, an announcement I'm going to make, but then I think you've all received a statement that has been released from Secretary Rubio and the NSA Director Waltz, and I'll be reading that as well for those who are watching from home and around the world. All right, we're all good? All right, thank you again, everybody. I just want to remind you as I walk into this room, now this is my third time walking into this room. I do so with a whole host of people behind me, literally and figuratively. And without their assistance and without the staff of this department, this briefing would not be possible. The nature of the work that happens is intensive. It is quiet. I won't say it's anonymous because we all know who's doing the work. But these are people who work every day to analyze, to research, to design, to help move forward the agenda and the policy
U.S. State Department
of
press
the Trump
briefing.
administration and the Secretary of State. And it is terrific work for the American people. So again, I want to thank everyone for making it possible for me to be standing here as well. So let's get started. Again, I have a little bit of a what we call a topper here for everyone who's watching, and welcome aboard.
A topper?
Let's see here. All right, to begin, as Secretary Rubio made clear yesterday, Venezuela is obligated to accept its repatriated citizens from the United States. This is not an issue for debate or negotiation, nor does it merit any reward. Unless the Maduro regime accepts a consistent flow of deportation flights, without further excuses or delays, the U.S. will impose new, severe, and escalating sanctions. As President Trump made clear in his proclamation, TDA is closely associated, closely aligned with, and indeed has infiltrated the Maduro regime. Maduro maintains close ties to regime-sponsored narco-terrorists.
Yes,
the Maduro
there's a tornado
regime must accept back
warning,
all Venezuelan
Storm
aliens
Chaser in
deported
Illinois
by the
at the
United
bottom.
States, especially their murderers, rapists, criminals, human traffickers, and other illegally present criminals in the United States. End of discussion. We will impose new and more severe sanctions upon any failure to do so or delays. Let me be clear, the United States government will enforce the laws of the United States. We will deport illegal aliens from our country, and we will have made clear that we expect countries to accept their nationals illegally present in the United States. We thank our partners in our region and around the world who are partnering with us to stop illegal immigration and combat vicious transnational crime. These efforts help all of us by making our entire region safer and more secure. On the Russia-Ukraine conflict, President Trump spoke with President Putin yesterday. As President Trump said, it was a good and productive phone conversation. Both President Trump and President Putin agreed on the need for this conflict to end with a lasting peace. They agreed, quote, the movement to peace will begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, as well as technical negotiations on implementation of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, full ceasefire and permanent peace. Today, President Trump spoke with President Zelensky. As President Trump said, it was, quote, a very good telephone call with much of the discussion based on the call made yesterday with President Putin in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. In addition to these conversations, everybody's talking. Special Envoy Witkoff met with Putin last week. Last weekend, Secretary Rubio spoke with Foreign Minister Lavrov, and of course, Secretary Rubio and National Security Advisor Waltz met with the Ukrainian delegation in Jeddah. Negotiations will continue in Saudi Arabia in the coming days. On reports of Russian strikes on civilian infrastructure overnight, attacks like these are precisely why President Trump is committed to peace. It is time for the death and destruction to stop and for an end to this senseless war. As Secretary Rubio has said, there is no military solution to this war. All sides need to move to a ceasefire. President Trump has made this clear as well. We cannot get to the table for negotiations to end the war without a ceasefire in place. The shooting has to stop first. Finally, we'd like to welcome home the NASA astronauts, Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, which of course we all watched yesterday. It was a remarkable scene with the dolphins that greeted them in the ocean also getting their own time on television. It was a fabulous event, and it reminded us about the nature of the 21st century, the modern age, and how progress continues. Now, you also have, that's the opening here of what I've seen, of course, over the last 24, 48 hours. Of course, there's always something that feels like it should have been a month of news that is happening on a daily basis. But we also have a direct statement, which I'm going to read to you as well, and to those who are watching from home or from their offices and from around the world, a statement from Secretary Rubio and the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. And this also directly addresses some issues that we're expecting to come up, certainly in the next week, and the nature of where things stand at this point. And so here is that statement from the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. Today, President Donald J. Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky had a fantastic phone conversation. President Zelensky thanked President Trump for a productive start for the work of the Ukrainian and American teams in Jeddah on March 11th. The meeting of the senior officials from both nations significantly helped in moving toward ending the war. President Zelensky thanked President Trump for the support of the United States, especially the Javelin missiles that President Trump was first to provide, and his efforts towards peace. The leaders agreed Ukraine and America will continue working together to bring about a real end to the war, and that lasting peace under President Trump's leadership can be achieved. President Trump fully briefed President Zelensky on his conversation with Russian President Putin and the key issues discussed. They reviewed the situation in Kursk and agreed to share information closely between their defense staffs in the battlefield situation as the battlefield situation evolved. President Zelensky asked for additional air defense systems to protect his civilians, particularly Patriot missile systems. President Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. The two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. The technical teams will meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to discuss broadening the ceasefire to the Black Sea on the way to a full ceasefire. They agreed this could be the first step toward the full end of the war and ensuring security. So let me just remind you here that that is technical teams. It will not be principals going to those negotiations. President Zelensky was grateful for the president's leadership in this effort and reiterated his willingness to adopt a full ceasefire. President Trump also discussed Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. President Zelensky also thanked President Trump for continuing to push humanitarian concerns, including the exchange of POWs. He noted that they had just had a successful exchange and thanked the president for his leadership. President Trump also asked President Zelensky about the children who have gone missing from Ukraine during the war, including the ones that had been abducted. President Trump promised to work closely with both parties to help make sure those children
are missing in
were
Ukraine?
returned home. They agreed all parties must continue the effort to make a ceasefire work. The presidents noted the positive work of their advisors and representatives, especially Secretary Rubio, National Security Advisor Waltz, Special Envoy Kellogg, and others. The presidents instructed their teams to move ahead with the technical issues related to implementing and broadening the partial ceasefire. The presidents instructed their advisors and representatives to carry out this work as quickly as possible. The presidents emphasized that in further meetings, the teams can agree on all necessary aspects of advancing toward lasting peace and security. So we are closer to peace than, of course, we have been at any other point. But still, I know you might have some questions.
Yeah, you guys are right.
This is
basically just a rehashing of what Caroline Leavitt
those
said.
Questions. Matt?
Thank you, Tammy. Can I just start with, since you opened with Venezuela.
She sounds like she does not want to be there.
This could be a very simple yes or no answer. Did you get an answer to the question I asked on Monday about whether using the AEA for these deportations means that you recognize Maduro's government and that he is him as the legitimate leader of Venezuela?
I do have an answer to that.
You do? Okay.
And the answer is no.
No, okay.
The answer is no. There is clearly, we've made it clear, and it's been obvious for quite some time, that Maduro is a dictator. It is a regime that we do not recognize. And we also understand, of course, that what we demand of him is something that has got to happen. I made that clear in my topper. The AEA proclamation is still valid, of course. That is currently being challenged in court, so I'm not going to comment on that litigation. But at the same time, it's not a regime we recognize. We don't recognize him as the president or a legitimate ruler at all.
Okay.
Right.
Secondly, then, and again, these are going to be extremely brief. On Friday, the Secretary signed, along with Pete Hegseth and the head of the National Defense University, this order removing the head of USIP.
That's the Institute for Peace.
Yes.
Yes.
Correct. I'm curious to know when and where the Secretary signed this.
Well, it's been signed. And I don't have the details of exactly where he was. He was in many places in the 21st century.
But we were with him. Both
yes,
of us.
we weren't with him. We were on an airplane, and he was in the giant Secretary of State area that is away from us. He wasn't with you. He wasn't. Yeah. But there's plenty of ways in which something can be signed.
Fine.
And
can you assure us that it was his signature was not done by auto pen?
I've never known him to do that.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that it was signed.
Okay.
It was signed. Yes, sir. All right. So this is like the Matt Lee show.
Well, no.
Yes,
It's not trying to,
and Daphne, we can
yes
come.
or no question.
Are we staying in the same
answer.
region?
Do you have anything? Can you tell us anything about Pete Morocco and his move from USAID?
How is that a yes or no question?
Well, Pete Morocco is returning to the State Department full-time as the Director of Foreign Assistance. An indispensable role in aligning all U.S. government foreign assistance with the President's priorities. So he is returning to that job, and you will, I'm sure, no doubt, be hearing from him in a variety of different ways.
Okay.
All right, now Daphne and Matt, that's it. Daphne, let's go. No, excuse me. Three questions.
Fine.
Daphne.
Thank you. So the White House has said that it has
She's
moved
sick of his
beyond the
shit.
U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal. Has that already been agreed to and signed?
Well, what I know is, and you've noted their comment, is that.
Okay, they're just asking the exact same questions we just heard from Caroline. Mostly. Looks like another protest at a Tesla dealership, this one in Canada. Protesters calling themselves Last Generation vandalize a Tesla dealership in Canada. A Tesla employee walks out and is met with spray paint.
On est dernière génération au Canada, un collectif de gens ordinaires qui demandent à ce que le gouvernement...
Saw somewhere else that they were arrested. Ramadan fast breaking with Allahu Akbar chants in front of a Christian church in Berlin.
فحملته فانتبذت به مكانا قصيا فأجاءها المخاض إلى جذع النخلة قالت يا ليتني مت قبل هذا وكنت نسيا من فحملته فانتبذت به مكانا قصيا الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا
Here's Osterman, Alzone.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
He's casting a spell. Yeah, I played this over my speakers and my furniture started floating around in the room. I don't know what's going on. Robot update from Boston Dynamics. Is this a breakdancing robot? What's going on here? It's a breakdancing robot. Okay. Federal Reserve Chairman Powell should be holding a news briefing any minute now regarding the economy and the interest rates. Jay Davis, they've invented the 80s. Neo Dark Matter, you're just jealous you could still move like that, Austin. Maybe. Here we go.
Point to heightened uncertainty about the economic outlook. It remains to be seen how these developments might affect future spending and investment. In our summary of economic projections, the median participant projects GDP to rise 1.7% this year, somewhat lower than projected in December, and to rise a bit below 2% over the next 2 years. In the labor market, conditions remain solid. Payroll job gains averaged 200,000 per month over the past 3 months. The unemployment rate at 4.1% remains low and is held in a narrow range for the past year. The jobs to workers gap has held steady for several months. Wages are growing faster than inflation and at a more sustainable pace than earlier in the pandemic recovery. Overall, a wide set of indicators suggests that conditions in the labor market are broadly in balance. The labor market is not a source of significant inflationary pressures. The median projection for the unemployment rate in the SEP is 4.4% at the end of this year,
this is
and
Palpatine.
4.3% over the next 2 years. Inflation has eased significantly over the past 2 years, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total PCE prices rose 2.5% over the 12 months ending in February, and that excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.8%. Some near-term measures of inflation expectations have recently moved up. We see this in both market and survey-based measures, and survey respondents, both consumers and businesses, are mentioning tariffs as a driving factor. Beyond the next year or so, however, most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation is 2.7% this year and 2.2% next year, a little higher than projected in December. In 2027, the median projection is at our 2% objective. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices
which thing
for
on the
the
list,
American
Banana?
people.
Palpatine or Darth
At
Nyquil?
today's meeting, the committee decided to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 4.25% to 4.5%. Looking ahead, the new administration is in the process of implementing significant policy changes in 4 distinct areas: trade, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulation. It is the net effect of these policy changes that will matter for the economy and for the path of monetary policy. While there have been recent developments in some of these areas, especially trade policy, uncertainty around the changes and their effects on the economic outlook is high. As we parse the incoming information, we're focused on separating the signal from the noise as the outlook evolves. As we say in our statement, in considering the extent and timing of additional adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the committee will assess incoming data, the evolving outlook,
he does kind
and
of
the
sound
balance
like
of
AI.
risks. We do not need to be in a hurry to adjust our policy stance.
Joe Knox, who
and
is
we are
this
well
guy?
positioned to wait for
This
greater
guy's
clarity.
probably one of the most powerful
our
people in the
SEP,
country behind
FOMC
Donald Trump.
Participants wrote down their individual assessments of an appropriate path for the federal funds rate
controls the Federal
based
Reserve.
on what each participant judges to be the most likely scenario going
Jerome
forward.
Powell.
An admittedly challenging exercise at this time in light of considerable uncertainty. The median participant
right, Darth
projects
Nyquil
that
makes
the
the
appropriate
list.
level of the federal funds rate will be 3.9% at the end of this year and 3.4% at the end of next year, unchanged from December. While these individual forecasts are always subject to uncertainty, as I noted, uncertainty today is unusually elevated. And of course, these projections are not a committee plan or a decision. Policy is not on a preset course. As the economy evolves, we will adjust our policy stance in a manner that best promotes our maximum employment and price stability goals. If the economy remains strong and inflation does not continue to move sustainably toward 2%,
thank you for the
we can
super
maintain
chat.
policy
Austin
restraint
is
for
hungry.
longer.
How'd you know?
If the labor market were to weaken unexpectedly or inflation were to fall more quickly than anticipated, we can ease policy accordingly. Our current policy stance is well positioned to deal with the risks and uncertainties that we face in pursuing both sides of our dual mandate. At today's meeting, we also decided to slow the pace of decline in our balance sheet. Since we began balance sheet runoff, our securities holdings have declined by more than $2 trillion. While market indicators continue to suggest that the quantity of reserves remains abundant, we have seen some signs of increased tightness in money markets. Beginning in April, the monthly cap on Treasury redemptions will be lowered from $25 billion to $5 billion. Consistent with the committee's intention to hold primarily Treasury securities in the longer run, we are leaving the cap on agency securities unchanged.
Dang, for once, the market's reacting
This action has
well
no implications
to Jerome
for
Powell
our intended
speaking.
stance of monetary policy
Dow's
and should
up
not affect
300,
the size of
S&P's
our
up
balance sheet
52
over the
or
medium
1%.
term.
Nasdaq's up
The committee also continued its
1.5%.
discussions as part of our 5-year
Bitcoin's
review
up
of our monetary
3%.
policy framework.
Ethereum's up 7%.
At this meeting, we focused on labor market
Solana's up
dynamics and our
5%.
maximum employment goal.
Dogecoin up 3%.
As we have indicated, our review will include outreach
XRP up
and public
10%.
events involving a wide range of parties, including
Anyone trying to
federalist
buy the
events around
Powell
country
dip,
and a research
sorry.
conference in May. Throughout this process, we will be open to new ideas and critical feedback, and we will take on board lessons of the last 5 years
Damn, Big
in
C's, a
determining
large
our
Italian
findings.
sub sounds pretty damn
We
good.
intend to wrap up the review by late summer. The Fed has been assigned 2 goals for monetary policy: maximum employment and stable
Stroman, could he
prices.
just cry a little to
We
drop
remain
market
committed
prices?
to supporting maximum employment, bringing inflation sustainably to our 2% goal, and keeping
Most of the time when he
longer-term
speaks, a
inflation
lot of people, the
expectations
market
well
dips
anchored.
because,
Our
they
success
think
in
what he's
delivering
saying
on
is
these goals
bad,
matters to all
and then it
Americans.
recovers. So a lot of people
We
just buy the
understand that
dip,
our actions
make
affect
some quick
communities,
money.
families, and businesses across the country.
Not this time.
Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to
Powell
achieve
coin
our
is tanking,
maximum
though.
employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I will look forward to your questions.
Howard Schneider with Reuters. Thanks for your time. So, two things on sort of the real side here: inflation and then GDP. How much of the higher inflation forecast for this year is due to tariffs? And since the policy path remains the same, are you effectively reading this as a one-time price level shock?
Okay, so how much of it is tariff? So let me say that it is going to be very difficult to have a precise assessment of how much of inflation is coming from tariffs and from other, and that's already the case. You may have seen that goods inflation moved up pretty significantly in the first 2 months of the year. Trying to track that back to actual tariff increases, given what was tariffed and what was not, very, very challenging. So some of it, the answer is clearly some of it. A good part of it is coming from tariffs, but we'll be working, and so will other forecasters, to try to find the best possible way to separate non-tariff inflation from tariff inflation. In terms of your sort of looking through question, too soon to say about that. As I've mentioned, it can be the case that it's appropriate sometimes to look through inflation if it's going to go away quickly without action by us, if it's transitory. And that can be the case in the case of tariff inflation. I think that would depend on the tariff inflation moving through fairly quickly, and would depend critically as well on inflation expectations being well anchored, longer term inflation expectations being well anchored.
Well, I guess I'm looking at the out years here, and the fact that the policy path doesn't change at all, and inflation is unchanged in the out years also. Doesn't that imply you all have basically decided that there is no signal here, and that it's just we're back to transitory again?
So I think that's kind of the base case, but as I said, we really can't know that. We're going to have to see how things actually work out. And the fact that there wasn't much change, I think that's partly because you see weaker growth but higher inflation. They kind of offset, and also, frankly, a little bit of inertia. When it comes to changing something in this highly uncertain environment, I think there is a level of inertia where you just say, maybe I'll stay where I am.
Thank you. Colby Smith with the New York Times. You just described inflation expectations as well anchored, but has your confidence in that assessment changed at all, given the increase in certain measures and the high degree of uncertainty expressed by businesses, households, and forecasters?
So on inflation expectations, of course, we do monitor inflation expectations very, very carefully, basically every source we can find, and short-term, long-term, households, businesses, forecasters, market-based. And I think the picture broadly is this. You do see increases widely in short-term inflation expectations, and people who fill out surveys and answer questionnaires are pointing to tariffs about that. If you look in the survey world, if you look a little further out, you really don't see much in the way of an increase. Longer-term inflation expectations are mostly well anchored. If you look at the New York, for example, then you have market-based, and it's the same pattern. People in markets are pricing in break-evens. Some higher inflation over the next year must be related to tariffs. We know from the surveys. But if you look out 5 years or the 5-year forward, you'll see that break-evens are either flat or actually slightly down in the case of the longer-term one. So we look at that, and we will be watching all of it very, very carefully. We do not take anything for granted. It's at the very heart of our framework, anchored inflation expectations, but that's what you see right now.
And how much weight do you put on the deterioration in consumer confidence surveys? You said recently that this is perhaps not the best indication of future spending, but I'm curious, what you think is behind this deterioration, and to what extent it could be a leading indicator for hard data.
So let's start with the hard data. We do see pretty solid hard data still. So growth looks like it's maybe moderating a bit, consumer spending moderating a bit, but still at a solid pace. Unemployment's 4.1%. Job creation most recently has been at a healthy level. Inflation has started to move up now, we think partly in response to tariffs, and there may be a delay in further progress over the course of this year. So that's the hard data. Overall, it's a solid picture. The survey data, both household and businesses, show significant rise in uncertainty and significant concerns about downside risks. So how do we think about that? And that is the question. As I mentioned the other day, as you pointed out, the relationship between survey data and actual economic activity hasn't been very tight. There have been plenty of times where people are saying very downbeat things about the economy and then going out and buying a new car. But we don't know that will be the case here. We will be watching very carefully for signs of weakness in the real data. Of course we will. But given where we are, we think our policy's in a good place to react to what comes, and we think that the right thing to do is to wait here for greater clarity about what the economy is doing.
Nick Timmeros of the Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, Chair Greenspan once defined price stability as an environment in which inflation is so low and stable over time that it doesn't materially enter into the decisions of households and firms. Can you say that today, that we have that price stability, that households and businesses are ignoring price growth when you see buy in advance psychology, big changes in inventories, and surveys that show consumers, at least in the short run, expect higher inflation?
So I do like that definition a lot. In fact, I used it at the recent conference where I spoke. So I think a world where people can make their daily economic decisions in businesses and they're not having to think about the possibility of significantly high inflation. We know inflation will bounce around. That is price stability. I think we were getting closer and closer to that. I wouldn't say we were at that.
All right, just to go over the conversation in chat about 1% a day. If you start with $10,000 and get 1% a day for 5 years, after 5 years, it is $777 billion. So there's that.
We delayed for the time being.
If that's the case, why are there cuts in the SEP for 2025?
So again, people wrote down 2 cuts the last time, and they look at the they wrote down meaningful decline in growth from 2.1 to 1.7 in 2025. A tick up in the unemployment
Sergeant,
rate, so not much
that
there,
is the math on
but
it.
core inflation up by 0.3, and so those two kind of
Now that wouldn't happen because the market's not open every day. But yeah, if you make 1% every single day on $10,000 after 5 years, it's $777 billion.
It's just really high uncertainty. What would you write down? I mean, it's really hard to know how this is going to work out. And again, we think our policy is in a good place. We think it's a good place where we can move in the direction where we need to. But in the meantime, it's really appropriate to wait for further clarity. And of course, the costs of doing that, given that the economy is still solid, are very low.
Edward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Edward Lawrence with Fox Business. So, with near 4% unemployment rate,
Sergeant, if you made 1% every day and continued to put all your money in every day, making 1%, that's how much it would be.
2023, 2024 levels. So, what's going on there?
Yeah. So,
if you're talking about taking money
that's a
out
feature that has been for
and
some
going
time
back
a
to
feature of
10K at the end of every
you
year,
have
then no.
Pretty high participation accounting.
That's the rate you got your 2015
You've got
charger
wages
for.
that are consistent with.
So you only owe $1
inflation,
trillion
assuming that
on your
we're
charger
gonna
now.
keep getting, relatively high productivity. We've got unemployment, pretty close to its natural level, but job.
Sergeant, you might be having a different conversation.
So is the
you might be
layoff
saying
rate.
something
So
different. That's why we're
you look at
getting
initial
different
claims or layoffs. So you're not seeing people losing their jobs, but you're seeing that people who don't have a job having to wait longer and longer. And the question is, which way does that break? If we were to see a meaningful increase in layoffs, then that would probably translate fairly quickly into unemployment because people are, it's not a big hiring market. We've been watching that, and it's just not in the data. It hasn't happened. What we've had is a low firing, low hiring situation, and it seems to be in balance now for the last 6, 7, 8 months. That's where we are. There's healthy levels of job creation too. So overall, it's a labor market that's in balance, and we watch it very carefully.
So then, have we seen the new administration's policies in the economic numbers yet? And when do you anticipate that happening?
In labor,
Sergeant,
or in,
you have
in
10K.
Labor and inflation just across
After
the
100
economy,
days of
I'm starting to
1%?
see the new policies take effect in the numbers.
Okay, I mean, here, I've
you
got
know,
the calculator out.
Only in a kind of an early way. I mean, it's only been a few months, right? For example, the
You'd have
layoffs that are happening here
$27,048 after
are,
100 days.
They're certainly meaningful to the people involved, and they may be meaningful to a particular neighborhood or region or area. But at the national level,
Then what?
They're not
But
significant.
you said
yet,
5
but
years.
We don't know how far that will go. We'll find out much more. I mentioned that you saw we've had two very strong goods inflation readings in the last 2 months, which is very unexpected. I think hard to trace it to specific tariffs, but it must.
So are you
have,
saying
must
you
have
withdraw
something
all
to
your
do
money
with-
after 100 days
it's
and
either
just start
noise,
over with the
and
principal
it'll come
again?
back, and that's very.
I mean, after
possible,
200
too, but if
days,
it
you have
is persistent, then
$73,000.
It must be to do with people buying ahead of tariffs or raising prices ahead of tariffs and things.
But you're
like
saying
that.
after every
Those
100
kinds of
days you
things happen.
withdraw all the
Very, very
profit
hard
and
to
start
capture.
over? Then yeah, that's very
Because so
different.
much of it is indirect.
I
A
see.
great
You're saying
example
something
is,
different.
Their washing machines were tariffed in the last round of tariffs, and prices went up. But prices also went up on dryers, which were not tariffed. So the manufacturers just.
So, okay, Sergeant, you're just saying every day you make $100 on your 10,000. You're not reinvesting the profits.
Work done in coming months.
Then
to
fine.
try to trace all
Once
that
again,
through,
that's a
but
very
ultimately,
different
though, it's
thing
too soon to be
than
seeing
making
significant
1%
effects in
every
economic
day
data.
and reinvesting all of the profit.
Craig Torres from Bloomberg News. Thanks, Chair Powell. You said transitory price increases from tariffs are the base case. Transitory is the base case. Wasn't it the base case last time? And didn't the FOMC forecast lower inflation ahead last time? And wasn't the lesson that it quickly got into services, haircuts, daycare, everything else? And so I'm just wondering why the 9 aren't taking that on board and are cutting twice this year.
When you say last time, are you talking about the last
pandemic? Yes, during the
because you
pandemic.
could have been talking about the last time there were tariffs, in which case the inflation was transitory. Yeah, no, of course we're well aware of that, and it's still the truth. If there's an inflationary impulse that's going to go away on its own, it's not the right policy to tighten policy, because by the time you have your effect, you're in effect by design. You are lowering economic activity and employment. And if that's not necessary, you don't want to do it. In real time, as we know, it's hard to make that judgment. And we're well aware, of what happened, obviously, with the pandemic inflation. But I mean, we have to look at this as a different situation. There are differences and similarities. I mean, it's a different time. We haven't had real price stability fully reestablished yet, and we have to keep that in mind. And we also we hear that people are very reluctant to take on to allow prices to go up. At the same time, we hear that businesses are intending to pass many of these prices through. So it's hard to say how this is going to work out.
Steve Leisman, CNBC. Thanks for taking my question, Mr. Chairman. The Bank of Canada, in its last policy statement, said monetary policy cannot offset the impacts of a trade war. What it can and must do is ensure that higher prices do not lead to ongoing inflation. I wonder if that kind of reflects your own sense of prioritization faced with higher prices and weaker growth, that the idea is you have to take care of inflation.
So we have two goals, right? We have maximum employment and price stability, and we have to balance those. And there can be situations in which they're in tension, right? And we actually have a provision in our consensus statement that says what we should do in that case. That's a very challenging, situation for any central bank, and certainly for us. And so what we say that we'll do is we'll look how far each of those two goals is, each of those two measures is from its goal, and then we'll ask how long we think it might take to get back to the goal for each of them, and we'll make a judgment, because our tools work in one direction. We're either tightening or loosening. So it's a very challenging situation. Let me say, we don't have that situation right now. That's not where the economy is at all. It's also not where the forecast is. I don't know any mainstream forecasts that really show significant problems like that.
Well, just to follow up, yesterday the UCLA Anderson forecast said there's high probability of a recession. Where do you stand on whether or not the slowdown you're seeing creates a higher probability or concern that you may have on recession. Thank you.
You know, there's always an unconditional possibility of a recession. It might be broadly in the range of 1 in 4 at any time. If you look back through the years, it could be within 12 months, a 1 in 4 chance of a recession. So the question is whether whether this current situation, those possibilities are elevated. I will say this: we don't make such a forecast. If you look at outside forecasts, forecasters have generally raised, a number of them have raised their possibility of a recession somewhat, but still at relatively moderate levels, you know, still in the region of the traditional, because they were extremely low. If you go back 2 months, people were saying that the likelihood of a recession was extremely low. So has moved
I wonder
up,
what
but
happened
it's not
2 months ago that made all the experts change their mind.
Hi, thank
Oh,
you.
Trump's in? Yeah, economy's going to tank.
As you know, I guess last night President Trump fired 2 members of the Federal Trade Commission.
What, 2 months and 1 day ago before Trump was in? Economy's booming.
Caused the kind of legal fight about
the Biden economy's
power
booming.
To fire independent people.
Oh, Trump's president now? Oh, this economy's
is that
terrible.
a threat to the Fed's independence? Could he do the same thing to the Fed board?
So I think I did answer that question in this very room some time ago, and I no desire to change that answer and have nothing new for you on that today.
Well, well, maybe I'll have another mulligan. As you know, I wanted to go back to the consumer sentiment, particularly the inflation expectations in the University of Michigan survey. In the summer of 2022, you cited the rise in the long-term inflation expectations in that index as the reason that you went big with a 3/4 point hike. So I know you've talked about all the different measures now, but you seem to not be placing the same weight on that. And so I'm just wondering, are you dismissing that, what we saw last week from the University of Michigan, or does that carry the same weight as it did in the past?
So I mentioned it back then, but in no way did I place a huge weight on it. I think that was a ex post story, but it wasn't the case. That was a preliminary reading, and so is this. And it's also, this is that Michigan, the one you're referring to, the longer term thing. You know, we look at it, we don't dismiss data that we don't like, we force ourselves to look at it, but it is an outlier compared to market-based and compared to other survey-based assessments of longer run inflation expectations. So we got to keep that in mind. And I would just say we look at all of them, and that one's kind of an outlier, but you know, nonetheless, we take notice of it.
As people are pointing out, Powell just used the word transitory again. Inflation,
Michael McKee from Bloomberg
will
Radio.
be transitory again.
There's a worry on Wall Street that when you say you want to study the net effect of the fiscal policies we may see on the economy, that you would end up waiting too long and be behind the curve in responding to any downturn. How can you reassure people that you can spot a problem early enough unless you decide to be preemptive?
Yeah, look, we're aware of we're well aware of how things are going to evolve and the timeframes and all that, and you know we will use our tools to foster achievement of our goals to the best we can.
Peace to be chunky. Remember when Biden was sharp and the economy was great?
For right now, the hard data are pretty solid. We are obviously aware of the soft sentiment data and high uncertainty, and we're watching that carefully, and we think it's a good time for us to wait for further clarity before we consider adjusting our policy stance.
Do you think it's going to be hard to get clarity in a government by tweet? I mean, do you have a feeling that at some point you actually will have a forecast you can trust?
Yes, I think we will. It's hard to say when that will be. You know, these decisions are going to be made, and they're going to be implemented, and then we'll know. At that point, we'll know what the decisions are, and we'll have to make assessments then about the implications for the economy. Those things will happen. A lot of them will happen over the course of, you know, in coming months, certainly over the course of this year, and we'll be adapting as we go.
Rachel.
Hi, Chair Powell. Rachel Siegel from the Washington Post. Thank you for taking our questions. At the beginning, you were talking about separating the signal from the noise and tariff inflation from non-tariff inflation. Can you walk us through what that looked like over the last couple of months, if there were specifics from the January meeting to now that helped you make those distinctions?
So when we say separating the signal from the noise, that's just a way of saying that things are highly uncertain and that you're reading about developments. The news is full of developments of tariffs being put on and taken off and things like that. Some of that is noise in the sense that it's not really telling you anything. You're trying to extract a signal from that, and the signal is what's going to be the effect on economic activity, on inflation, on employment, and all those things. So that's really what we say.
In the
signal
house
and noise.
over
Sorry,
on
the second
Twitch.
thing was.
Or similarly for tariff inflation,
No
non-tariff
word
inflation,
on whether
ways
he's
that you're
gotten a
making-
haircut
That's
yet or
sort
not.
of a special case of that. The idea being, and I do think that the first 2 months of this year are a great example. You've got high readings for goods inflation after a string of readings that average close to zero, and you have to ask, it's coming during tariffs, but you can't. It's very hard to actually scientifically go back and match up those increases and say, yes, I can prove that that's from tariffs, but it kind of has to be to some extent. Plus noise. There can be idiosyncratic readings in various categories, which will shortly reverse.
He's
and
basically
that
just
happens
saying
too, and that
we
could
don't
be
know what's
a
going to
big
happen
piece of it.
until
I
it
think
happens.
We'll know. In a couple of months, we'll
Thanks,
know whether
Powell.
those were, where that really was from. But that's another case where I think it's going to be very, very challenging to.
Blaine says he's
unpack
growing it out even
the
faster out of
inflation
pure
that we
spite.
see over
That's the
course of
Hong
this year,
spirit.
and be able to say with confidence how much of that came
Take some
from
hair growing
inflation and how much
supplements.
of it, from tariffs, and how much of it.
Next time, come
didn't.
back with a
But that's what we'll be
with a
doing.
man
we'll
bun.
Be doing that, and so will everybody else, and we'll all be trying very hard to make that assessment. And I'm sure we will make a lot of progress on that, and we already have. But it's going to be a challenge.
Do you have a sense yet as to what, in your mind, would make something cross from noise to a signal, what that threshold would look like?
It would depend on what we're talking about. I mean, obviously, you're looking for direct evidence that particular pieces of inflation are or are clearly not caused by tariffs. For
Draynor, you
example,
can make a
if it's
general
something
bet that
was,
tariffs will encourage
in the
domestic
service
growth.
sector
Yeah.
that was far away from anything that's
Well, of course,
tariffed. You
but
might
by
think that
when
that
would be
is,
hard to predict.
Like, frankly, housing services.
There could be quite a bit of short-term pain before
which,
there's
which,
long-term
by the way, has been
growth.
behaving well. Which for some time
And
was
it's likely there will be.
kind of our problem. Now it's slow,
And then there's
but
so
it's
many other
definitely,
factors that draw into it. I
moving
mean,
down
does-
in a very good way.
Economies go through
It's more
cycles.
now
Are we
with
going to
goods and
be
to some extent with,
in a bus cycle?
with non-housing services,
which is
inflation.
really not entirely have anything to do with tariffs. That that would be bad to coincide those.
Thanks for taking our questions, Chair Powell. Kelly O'Grady, CBS News. So consumer sentiment has dipped dramatically, but you say the economy and the hard data is still solid. What is your message to consumers that clearly disagree and don't feel that strength? Because the hard data they're looking at is their grocery bill.
Okay, so a couple things. The grocery bill is about past inflation, really. There was inflation in 21, 2, and 3, and prices went up. The current level, it's not the change in prices. It's they're unhappy, and they're not wrong to be unhappy that prices went up quite a bit, and they're paying a lot for those things. So I think that is the fundamental fact, and has been for a long time, a couple of years, why people are unhappy with the economy. It's not that the economy is not growing. It's not that inflation is really high. It's not that unemployment is high. It's none of those things. We have 4.1%
It's that wages
unemployment.
have
We've
not
got
kept
2%
up
growth,
with inflation
and
anywhere
it's
near.
a pretty good economy. But people are unhappy because of the price
people are
level.
working, but they're
And I
working
do
at the
completely
same pay,
understand
in some
that.
cases less than they were
And just
5,
to
10 years
follow
ago.
up, why are you still projecting 2 rate cuts this year if your own projections show inflation higher for longer? Does that mean you see a slowdown in economic growth?
Draynor, I tend to
as a real
agree
threat?
with that general outlook.
I think if
Once
you-
again, though,
Yeah, I mean,
win. It's impossible
remember we
to predict
came into
win.
this with at
That
the
could be
December
years
meeting,
from now.
The median was 2 cuts. The median was, and so you come in and you see, broadly speaking, weaker growth,
Or it
but
could
higher
come a lot
inflation.
sooner. I mean, it's
and they kind
impossible
of
to
balance
tell.
each other out. So you think, and unemployment is really only a 1/10 change. So there's just not a big change in the forecast. There really isn't. Modest, meaningfully higher growth and meaningfully higher inflation, which call for different responses, right? So they cancel each other out, and people just said, okay, I'm going to stay here. But the second factor is it's so highly uncertain. Is just, we're sitting here thinking, and we obviously are in touch with businesses and households all over the country. We have an extraordinary network of contacts that come in through the reserve banks and put in the beige book, and also through contacts at the board. And we get all that, and we do understand that sentiment has fallen off pretty sharply, but economic activity has not yet. And so we're watching carefully. So I would tell people that the economy seems to be healthy, We understand that sentiment is quite negative at this time, and that probably has to do with turmoil at the beginning of an administration that's making big changes in areas of policy, and that's probably part of it. I do think the underlying unhappiness people have about the economy, though, is more about the price level.
No shit.
Victoria. Hi, Victoria Guido with Politico. I wanted to ask, first of all, if you could clarify. You were talking about how tariffs were a good part of the uptick in the inflation forecast, and I was just wondering what that specifically refers to. Is that the tariffs that have already been put in place? Is that anticipating some of the tariffs that might be coming on April 2nd? And then also, if you wouldn't mind, talking a little more about the balance sheet decision and what drove that. Did that have anything to do with expectations of how the debt ceiling, raising the debt ceiling, might affect the reserve supply?
Yeah. So in the SEP, you'll see that there's not further progress on core inflation this year. We're kind of flatlining, going sideways. We don't ask people to write down how much of this is from tariffs and how much of it is not. But some of it is from tariffs. We know that tariffs are coming in. We know that they're probably already, all forecasters have tariff inflation affecting core PCE inflation, core CPI inflation this year, without exception. I'm not aware of an exception. So it's in there. I can't tell you how much of that it is. In terms of the balance sheet, so yeah, I think, I guess the way I'd say it is, it was the flows in and out of the TGA that got us thinking about it. But as we thought about it, we really came to the view that this was a good time to make the move that we made. And broadly, committee that came around to the view that we would do the same thing we'd already done, which is I guess in June, was it June? Whenever it was, we lowered the pace of QT, and we're just going to do that again. We're going to cut it roughly in half. And the sense of that is, if you're cutting the pace of QT roughly in half, then the runway is probably doubled. Okay, so it's going to be slower for longer, and people really like that. People thought that's a good idea. It's like a plane. You can think of it like a plane coming in for a landing. As we get closer, and we by the way, we still think that reserves are abundant. Although you begin to see some of the things we look at begin to react a little bit, but we still think that they're abundant. And of course, now the TGA is emptying out, so reserves are higher now, so you can't really see the underlying signal. So we came around to the view, and it had a lot of appeal, and so we did it. It has no implications at all for monetary policy. It has no implications at all for the ultimate size of the balance sheet. It isn't sending a signal in any hidden way that you can try to tease out. It's just not there. We're basically, it's very consistent with our plans and our practices that we've published and that we've followed since we began this, what is a very successful rundown of the balance sheet. Again, the second time that we've slowed the pace, and we've said that we would stop when we were somewhat above the level we judge as ample. And clearly we're not at that level yet, but we're going to be approaching it more slowly. It's a common sense kind of a thing, and it had pretty broad appeal, I will say.
Claire Jones, Financial Times. You said in January, Chair Powell, that inflation expectations remained well anchored. Would you still say they remain well anchored today? And just to reiterate the question others have asked, if they're not so well anchored, why hasn't there been a more radical shift to the policy path today? Thank you.
So when we talk about inflation expectations being well anchored, we're talking about longer run inflation expectations. And they really haven't moved much, I mean, if at all. There's one reading that everyone's focusing on that it's higher, but the other survey readings and the market-based readings all show relatively, well anchored inflation expectations. You would expect that expectations of inflation over the course of a year would move around because conditions change, and in this case, we have tariffs coming in. We don't know how big, there's so many things we don't know, but we kind of know there are going to be tariffs, and they tend to bring growth down. They tend to bring inflation up in the first instance. So I would say, I'm not dismissing what we're seeing in short-term inflation expectations. We, as I mentioned, follow that very carefully. But when we say expectations are well anchored, we're really looking at longer terms, 5-year and out, and there's really no story to tell 5 years and out, either in market-based or in surveys. But we'll watch it. I mean, we're not we're not going to miss any evidence that longer-term or medium-term inflation expectations are moving.
Chair Powell, Neil Irwin with Axios. Treasury Secretary Bessent has observed that a large share of job growth over the last couple of years has been in what he calls government or government-adjacent sectors, healthcare, education. Do you agree that there's some weakness in underlying private job growth, and do you see the composition of job growth as something that has policy implications?
So that has been the case. We talked about that over the course of the last year. There were some good number of months and times when a lot of the job creation was concentrated in, educational institutions, healthcare, state governments, things like that. There were also times when private sector job growth has been moving in a healthy range. I mean, they're all jobs, but and remember, we're at very low unemployment for quite a time now. So I think it's a good labor market, but it's something that we monitor carefully. From our standpoint, employment is employment. But the elected government is entitled to have, we don't have policies that address different kinds of employment, but the elected government has a different role, and they can have those.
Can I do a quick QT question? Does the committee envision at some point tapering the MBS runoff as well?
I think tapering it, I don't know. There's no plan to do that. At a certain point, we'll stop runoff. And we may or may not stop MBS runoff, though, because we want to stop runoff in net at some.
I think we've probably heard all we need to from this. Markets are reacting well. Dow's up 550, S&P's up it's up 1.7%, Nasdaq's up 2.3%. Crypto's reacting well, Bitcoin up 4.6%. Ethereum up 8%, Solana 8%, XRP up 12.5%. All the Democrats who've been cheering the market decline are going to have to come up with something else. All the Democrats who don't understand that market corrections are actually quite normal. And who are saying, oh, the Republicans, do you regret Trump coming in yet? Do you regret your Trump vote yet? No, I don't regret my Trump vote at all. I don't care that the market's dropped 10%, which happens all the fucking time with normal correction cycles. The market's probably been overvalued for a while. Needed to have a little correction, and it'll head back up like it does all the damn time. Jay Davis, eggs, no wait, Tesla, no wait, price of gas, oh shit, that's going down too, oh no! So everything Trump's doing is working after 2 months in office? What is this, Len? Is this Hillary Clinton? God, she's looking rougher than usual.
There's no way to sugarcoat it. There's no way to explain it away. Autocracy is on the march, and we now have a government in the United States that has thrown in its lot with the autocrats.
Yeah, you're right, Neo Dark. Tesla's up almost 7% as well.
Which has made a choice to support those who wage war, not peace. Who have given enormous power to the
the
men
supply
who
of baby blood is
control
tight.
the information flow.
Walt Disney, is it
in our
Halloween?
world, who have all pledged allegiance
I don't
to
know,
the
this is
continuation
scarier than
of
anything I've ever seen on
algorithms
Halloween.
that not only addict us, but poison us with hatred and fear. So moments like this, which are too few and far between right now, need to be underscored with urgency. And it is certainly my hope that when the World Forum ends, those of us privileged enough to be here will continue to speak out and work for the betterment of democracy and humanity. I was so struck listening to all of the speakers, but one of the themes that really stood out to me was what Maria said about information, what Natalia said about information, and what David Sinclair said about information. Information determines how we think, and how we think determines what we say, and what we say determines what we do. Whether it's about aging in the human body, or preserving and protecting our freedom and our democracy.
Still no movement on the standoff situation at CIA headquarters. No updates, no movement. I guess there's no actual tornado in Illinois. State Department briefing's over. White House briefing is over. Once again, nothing ever happens. Democrats are going to have to find a whole bunch of new shit to be angry and complain about. Don't worry. I have full faith that they will complain about it. They'll find something. They never run out of things to complain about. Don't worry, guys. Don't worry. Democrat rees will continue. Morale will not improve. Do not worry. Stroman, is Hillary sharing Kamala's stash? I don't know. Who taught who how to drink? Hillary teaching Kamala or Kamala teaching Hillary? Stroman, politics is theater. Yes, sir. Yes, it is. Well, that's it, guys. I've actually got some stuff I've got to get done this afternoon. Thank you for hanging with me. Until we hung again. Good afternoon. Hong evening. And hong night. Goodbye, everybody.